Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Embedding Sustainability into Your Consultancy Practice digital event. My name is Michael Bolt, and I am an events delivery manager at CMI, and I will shortly be handing over to Jeremy Webster to begin today's event. If you do have any questions at all during the digital event, you can ask them using the live chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we will seek to answer as many as we can throughout the presentation and also during the Q&A. Today's session is being recorded and will be shared with you later today for those of you who have booked to attend, and the event recording will also be available on the CMI website and the CMI YouTube channel. So without any further delay, over to Jeremy to begin today's event.
Hello everybody, welcome to this seminar on embedding sustainability into your consultancy practice. My name's Jeremy Webster. I'll introduce myself a bit more later on, but I work as a consultant in the field of sustainability. I teach sustainability at a couple of universities, and what I want to do today is share with you some of the concepts of sustainability and discuss how these can be incorporated in your consultancy practice. It's interesting, one of the things that I know from my teaching work is that nowadays sustainability is a normal part of many university programs, but that's relatively new. So those of you who graduated more than 5 years ago are likely not necessarily to have covered this kind of thing. So what I want to try and do today is introduce you to a number of different concepts around sustainability, thinking about where you can get information from about sustainability, some examples of sustainability consulting, and to answer any questions that you might have about how you can make sustainability work for you. So one of the particular things that I do want to be sure to cover is about how you can understand what your clients are doing on sustainability. And I've got an example in here of a big company, their sustainability report. Have a look at it and see what that means from the consultancy point of view. So let me start with a few basic concepts of sustainability. Some of these you may have encountered anyway, others may be new to you. And there's a bit of a history to this, I have to say, that one of the first discussions about trying to incorporate sustainability into a business context came up more than 25 years ago with a model that is known as the triple bottom line. Some of you may have come across this, and in fact there's a modification to this which I'll talk about in a moment. But John Elkington wrote in 1994 quite a seminal paper, actually helping people get to grips with the fact that sustainability is not just about the environment, and that's something that we have to get out of people's heads. People who talk about sustainability, people think it's all about climate change and pollution. The answer is that that's not true. The answer to sustainability is that it's a three-way model that talks about how do we balance economic sustainability, which is vital for growth of the world economy, for paying for society, with environmental sustainability, so using the resources that we have on Earth without spoiling the environment, and social sustainability, so making sure that people who are involved in anything that we do can continue to live fulfilling and socially proper lives. And getting the balance between those three things is what sustainability is about. That little orange area in the middle of the diagram there. All too often, consultants tend to focus on economic well-being. That's typically why consultants get asked to go and do things, projects for clients, for governments, for sponsors, whoever they are. It's all about improving a company's economic prospects, improving their profitability, improving their performance. But if that's done at the cost of the environment or by exploiting the social resources and social stakeholders that are involved, then that's not sustainable in any context. You'll all have heard of, I'm sure, of cases, and you may even, as consultants, have been involved in projects where offshoring is a solution. So getting your product manufactured in a country where the manufacturing costs are lower than in the UK. That sounds great because it transfers some of the wealth to other countries, perhaps developing countries. But remember, of course, that social standards are not necessarily the same in those countries. So we hear stories, and they're reported very often in the press, about poor working conditions in other countries that go to providing products that are imported into the UK and sold to consumers. Those standards wouldn't be permitted in the UK. So is that a sensible solution? It doesn't necessarily help with the social side of this triple bottom line, the sustainability angle. We also hear, of course, of environmental disasters in, again, other countries, but not only in other countries, where the environment is somehow damaged through extraction of natural resources, through transferring land from forest into farmland, for example. So there are lots of angles on the different three bubbles, economic, environmental, social, that consultants sometimes unconsciously get involved with. And one of the things that I'd like to talk today is how can we actually do better at this? So remember that triple bottom line, because I will come back to it. Because sometimes the triple bottom line there is represented as the three Ps, it's sometimes called: people, planet, and profit, or prosperity, if you don't like the profit word. But the three Ps is another way that you might encounter this particular model. I'm hoping that many of you will have seen this, or many of you will perhaps be aware of it, even if you're unaware of the source of where this model came from. So that's fundamental principle number one. Think about the triple bottom line. Now, this is often represented as ESG. That's an abbreviation that you may have come across in corporate reporting and investing, actually. It's a big deal in the investment world, thinking of investing in stocks, in companies. What is their environmental profile? What is their social profile? And what is their governance profile? Now, that's not quite the same as the three Ps, but that ESG model, which again you will have seen, I'm sure, if you're involved in financial consulting, is very, very prevalent these days, looking at what companies are doing. And many companies will report their, and in their annual report, they'll comment on their environmental, social, and governance outcomes, in addition to their financial figures. So ESG is a bit of a modification of that triple bottom line model, but worth bearing in mind. What it does, it allows you to actually go and look in client information, in public reports about your client, to find out actually what is their environmental profile, what is their environmental impact, what is their governance, how does that work, how are their ethics, and so on and so forth. So you'll see both of those models quoted. They're slightly different, but they're a key element in sustainability. So I started in 1994, so a good while ago, and fast forward now to 2015 and think about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Now, these are, again, well published, well publicized, well talked about, 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were adopted formally by the UN in 2015. And they cover, you can see from the diagram, many different aspects of sustainable development. The idea being that everything about these is to do with having sustainable development in the world. 17 Sustainable Development Goals, each of which has a number of targets. There's 169 altogether, and 232 indicators. If you really want to look at all of these, have a look at the website there, the UN Sustainable Development Goals website. The address is on the slide, because these form a fundamental principle of communication about sustainable development. Most companies now use the language of the UN Sustainable Development Goals to explain what they're doing, to talk about their policies and strategies, to explain their strengths, their activities, all to do with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And these are now in common language. You yourself, whatever company you work for, if you work for a large company, you've probably got an annual report. You've probably got a commentary in the annual report about your company's adherence to the Sustainable Development Goals. You may even have a separate sustainability report. Lots of companies do that, and I'll show an example later on, where they just focus on exactly these particular goals and what they're doing to achieve them. So Sustainable Development Goals, really useful framework. If you're thinking about operating in consultancy in the sustainability sphere, or you're just operating in regular business consultancy, you're going to need to be aware of how your work impacts these Sustainable Development Goals and how your company, your client, is impacting these things, because it gives you an opportunity to have a broader conversation with them, not just about the briefing that you may have had to work on an operational improvement somewhere, but actually a much broader societal and environmental discussion about their impact on the planet and its population as a whole. So Sustainable Development Goals are a really fundamental principle and concept that is worth remembering. Another one that I'll talk about is about thinking of the impact that we have on our environment as more than just being climate change. I'm speaking to you, recording this today, on what is supposed to be the hottest day ever in the United Kingdom. These features of climate change, heat waves, storms, forest fires, all of these things, I'm not here to persuade you whether or not to believe in climate change and believe in the science, but the fact is that the environmental impact of our activity extends far beyond just the weather getting a bit warmer. And there's a useful model that I'd like to show you now that talks about impact on the planet in a broader sense. So when you think about climate change, that's one of the things we talk about. Of course, pollution of the oceans is another one. Now, that's not related to climate change, but it's a similar issue on our planetary systems. And there's a model that was developed in 2015 in Sweden, which talks about 9 different planetary impacts of human activity. And by human activity, of course, we mean business, because actually this is all created by trying to exploit the resources of our planet in order to create wealth, which is what business consultants work with all the time. Now, this particular model, again, there's a link there you can have a look at, the Stockholm Resilience link, which talks about 9 different planetary systems: ozone layer depletion, biosphere integrity. You know, we can talk through them individually, and I'm happy to come back to this slide later on if there's any questions on this, that actually take much further the concept of our impact on planet Earth. That we're not just talking about chucking CO2 out into the atmosphere and that causing problems. We're talking about how we deal with the ocean, how we deal with the freshwater cycle, how we deal with agricultural fertilizers and their wash off into oceans and watercourses, which causes great damage. But of course, the planet's growing in population. We have to feed people, and artificial fertilizers have been the mainstay of that growth in population over the last 150 years. So thinking that the realization that the problems that this has caused means that consultants actually have a big job to do. There's a lot of work that management consultants can do now on thinking about how to deal with our impact on a range of different areas in environmental terms. And if we look at linking environmental impact with economic and social growth, we come up with a concept that you may have encountered, again, those of you that have read about this, about the known as the donut economy. Now, this model is useful because it talks about, it maps onto the existing, the triple bottom line model, maps onto the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and maps onto the planetary impact that we have, where donut economics says that you've got to earn enough to pay for all the social requirements of living as a human on planet Earth. Those social requirements are not about business, they're about what's done in government, for example, and taxation pays for a lot of our social well-being, healthcare, education, all of those things. They're not businesses, they're things that we provide as society to our members, but we can only do that with financial well-being, which is earned by our economic activities. So there's a certain amount of economic activity that is absolutely essential in order to pay for our social well-being. But on the other hand, we can't exploit the planet so much that it destroys where we're living. So there's a region, the donut, if you like, in the middle, which actually allows for a successful economy where we earn enough to pay for our social well-being, but not so much that we completely destroy the environment that we're living in. And this model is quite useful. And if you Google donut economics, you will find there's a book on it, there's models on it, which actually talk very much about how to ensure that we are in the right place, that we're earning enough so that we pay taxes that support our social well-being, but we don't earn so much that we exploit nature. Now, as consultants, this is actually, in my mind, a really, really important concept because it draws together all of the previous sustainability concepts that we've been talking about. It draws together the need for economic sustainability, the need to earn money for prosperity, the planetary issues about not the environmental issue, if you like, not talking about taking too much out of the planet, and the social requirement, which actually is necessary in order to make sure that humans can continue to exist with the wealth that is earned to pay for those social activities. Now, we can draw these concepts together in a final concept that I want to introduce, which is about the circular economy. Again, some of you will have encountered this before. This is actually taking a view of economic activity that is a closed loop, as opposed to a linear view, an old-fashioned view, if you like, that says, dig resources out of the ground, make things with them, use them, then throw them away. Very straight line linear model, which I have to say, unfortunately, has existed for since the Industrial Revolution and before. The circular economy is much more focused on reusing resources, repairing, remanufacturing old resources that are no longer functional, and feeding them back into the supply chain, and only discarding things when there is completely no further use for them. Actually thinking of mining resources that were thrown away in the past, mining old rubbish tips and so on, actually is proving to be quite a lucrative business. So we talk about the concept of a circular economy, and the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, Ellen MacArthur, the global sailor who some of you will be aware of, was so moved by, when sailing through the desolated wastes of Antarctica, seeing plastic bottles floating around. And actually it made her set up this foundation, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, to explore and investigate and develop models for considering the planet as a circular economy, so that things are reused and resources are not wasted, in order to knock people out of the old model. In effect, mine minerals, use engineering, make things with them, use them, discard them, and chuck them away. So the circular economy model exists and is particularly powerful in the manufacturing world. And those consultants among you who work in manufacturing, if you're not aware of this, then it's definitely useful to become aware, so that when you have conversations with your clients who are in manufacturing, that actually you can talk to them and demonstrate that you understand the issues and difficulties that face them. Because it's often much easier to make something new, use it and throw it away, than it is to go through the great complexity of reusing, recycling, remanufacturing. One of the reasons why the whole recycling, domestic recycling, is still stuck at levels of 30 and 40% rather than 50, 60, 70, 80%, which in some countries they have achieved, is because of the complexity and cost of sorting out recycled materials, and particularly the issue of how to reprocess them in a cost-effective way. Again, you'll all be aware of the stories and the pictures that show seas full, the great garbage patch in the Pacific, where recycling bottles and plastic bottles and so on that were supposed to be recycled have ended up rivers in third world countries that are just full of plastic waste, fires that have just been caused by emptying containers of plastic waste and just burning it because it can't be recycled. So somebody had a bright idea that said, what a great idea to send recycling to developing countries and let them recycle it, and it will boost their economy. Well, that only works if it is actually recycled there and not just thrown into the rivers. And in some ways, this is developing countries getting rid of their problem. Actually, at some point, consultants, engineers, manufacturers have to face up to the fact that plastic bottles don't recycle themselves. Somebody's got to do it. They've got to be collected. There's a cost associated with it. The unfortunate thing at the moment is it's much cheaper to make a new plastic bottle than it is to recycle an old one. And that's why the cost of, that's why there is not enough recycling. And until the recent oil price rises caused by the Ukraine situation, raw crude oil was a much cheaper feedstock for plastics than recycled plastic. Now, of course, that economic picture has changed, and recycling is now slightly more attractive, and therefore may happen a bit more. So it could be that the people who glue their hands to the M25, protesting about the use of oil and fuel, and make a lot of people very angry, what they're trying to say is stop using oil, recycle. You have a circular economy. The argument against not using oil is it's cheap. Well, not so cheap these days. And actually, there will be changes in adherence to circular economy because of changes in things like natural resource prices, whether they're caused by wars or taxes or what else. So, circular economy, familiarize yourself with the circular economy, because included in the whole circular economy concept is accurate monitoring of what's going on, of information, of data about companies' use of resources. And one of the things that I'd like to move on to now is about where do you find sustainability data from? As I mentioned earlier, most of you will work in companies where reports are generated annually, annual report, which includes data on sustainability. Interestingly, sustainability reporting is not a legal requirement. It's optional, but of course most large companies are now doing it because of public pressure, interestingly enough. There are global standards, and anybody who's from a finance background will have probably encountered some of these, the Sustainability Accounting Standards Board, about how to account for sustainability information. Global Reporting Initiative, the GRI, and I will show you an example of how this information is available. Because as consultants, if you're not able to get information about the companies that you're working for, then it's very difficult for you to offer any quantified guidance. Here, what we're talking about is looking at a company's annual report, annual sustainability report. What's interesting is, of course, in the accounting world, auditing is a legal requirement. In the sustainability world, it's not a legal requirement. There are companies doing it, and interestingly enough, a lot of the accounting firms now starting to do it, to audit companies' sustainability reports and to sign them off, in effect, to verify that the data that's being presented, which is often not financial data, it's often data about energy usage, for example, pollution levels. The auditing companies are very well equipped to audit organizations' sustainability reporting. There are ISO standards in the field, but of course they're guidance only, they're not required. Companies can adopt them if they wish, but they don't have to. So the whole process of finding data about sustainability for your target company, if you have a client that reports, it's useful to know that. If your client is engaging one of their stakeholders or other companies, it's useful for you to be able to understand these things. Because you can go to most large companies, and here's one that I'm sure we've all heard of, Marks and Spencer's. Very easy to find their sustainability report. You just Google it, M&S Sustainability Report. Very easy to find, no problem on the internet. You can get all of this information. What's quite interesting, however, is that you can look in the pages of these reports, and they contain lots of interesting information about their achievements on net zero, looking for to reduce pollution, their adherence to what I mentioned earlier, the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You can see there on the top right page there the coloured boxes, which are universally used these days to explain how people adhere to the various UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's a key element of the M&S Sustainability Report, and you'll find that it exists everywhere else. Now, you've also got in their report some data, and I'll come on and show you a bit about that in a minute. And a page that is shown on the bottom right there, their approach to sustainability. What are they doing? What are their plans? When do they want to achieve certain goals by, in terms of their sustainable impact, not only on the environment, because that's typically where these things have started, but also their social sustainability, their economic sustainability, obviously their financial performance, very important, but their governance, this ESG model that we talked about, that's right there in the M&S Sustainability Report. Their environmental, their social, and their governance strategies to keep their company and make their company sustainable. But we have to take care, and of course this is something that you only find out by looking at these reports and looking at them actually in a bit of detail, that one of the concepts in sustainability data reporting that consultants really need to be aware of is the different elements of, let's say, planetary impact, according to how they're caused and where they're caused. So if you take Marks and Spencer, and this isn't, I'm not getting at Marks and Spencer in any respect, because all the retailers are on the same page here, that they find it very easy to monitor and report on their sustainability impact of their stores in the UK perhaps and in other countries, how much energy they use, how much pollution they generate, how much recycling they carry out, how much water they use, and other factors like that on different planetary levels. But it's actually very hard for them to monitor the energy usage, let's say, of their whole value chain. And in sustainability reporting, there's a concept around different scopes of sustainability reporting. And if you look at sustainability reports, you'll find that different companies pay more attention to some of these things. So if you take the M&S example, which I'm using right now because it's here, they look at 3 different scopes, and these are universal language. This is part of the Global Reporting Initiative, GRI. Scope 1 data is all about the company's direct operations. So the operations of its stores, let's say, if they're a retail outlet. Scope 2 is about things they bought in, like power and water, that may themselves have an impact on, let's say, the environment, but they're treated differently. So if you at home buy your electricity from a renewable source, then you can feel quite proud of yourself that you're only using energy from a renewable company. And actually, in your home, that would be your scope 2 energy usage impact on the environment would be 0 because you've bought your energy from a recyclable source. Of course, not everybody does that. Companies don't do it either. Sometimes they generate their own, in which case it would be covered in their scope 1 requirement, scope 1 reporting. Sometimes they buy it in just from the grid. And if you're in engineering, you'll know that on some days, and today's a good example, the amount of energy produced by solar power is a significant element of our energy. But of course, at night time, there is no solar power. So if you want energy at night time, we have to kick up the gas turbines and get the fossil fuel going. So unless it's windy, which sadly it's not today. So wind power today over the UK won't be very much. Solar should be pretty good. But at night, neither of those are going to apply. So we have to burn gas to make our power, which is not particularly environmentally friendly. So scope 1, inside the company. Scope 2, what's bought in from outside. Scope 3 is all the rest. And interestingly, the text below is lifted directly out of M&S's report, where they admit that 97% of their carbon footprint is in scope 3. It's outside the company's control. This all includes everything from the manufacture of the underwear that they sell in their stores, the growing of avocados in Kenya, the running of the farms out there, the air shipment to bringing all these avocados into the UK, until they enter their own system, so their warehousing system. Any carbon footprint associated with that is not included. And for them, it's 97%. Now, you think, well, why are they wasting their time focusing on 3% of what they do? And that's a very useful, pertinent consultancy question. They spend a lot of time publishing lots of information, and all the retailers do it, I have to say, on how wonderfully well they're doing, reducing the energy usage in their stores and so on. And don't kind of mention that 97% of what they do is outside their control. And this is why, we look at things like food miles, for example, the impact of bringing avocados in from Africa, and not just the shipping of them, but the social impact of growing them, and so on, is all in scope 3. It's in the value chain outside the company's control. Likewise, if you're a manufacturer and you manufacture a product, and the tire industry is a good example of this one. If you manufacture tires, you've got scope 3 impact on your supply chain. So all the raw materials that come from, rubber trees in remote countries in the world, and minerals from mining, all of those will be outside your control. And the usage of the product, once you've sold it to the customer, is also outside your control. But if you want to be clever, you can say, well, we're making our tyres much more efficient so that cars that use energy for propulsion, which of course we all will, whether it's electricity or hydrocarbons, can be more efficient. So they can claim, as a tyre company, lots of wonderful achievements in scope 3 for their customers if they make their tyres more efficient. You think, well, it's fair enough. It's an acceptable argument, but of course, what that does is take away the responsibility from them looking at their supply chain and their manufacturing. So think carefully about scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3, because it's really important to understand the difference and to understand as a consultant what you can do about it. Now, many consultancies have sustainability practices. Here's an example, Deloitte. We may even have some people watching from Deloitte. And on the Deloitte website, and I've just picked this one at random out of the big consultancy companies, lots of very useful information about what they're doing for sustainability, thought leadership pieces, case studies of their clients that they've worked on with sustainability projects, and helping how to contact them, of course, for looking at different elements of sustainability that you might want to, where you might want some help, of course. That's a crucial element for them. They sell all sorts of different services in sustainability. They have advisory services for financial, for ESG. If you've got to talk about the way you report your environmental and social and governance responsibilities, they'll help you do that. All sorts of things about strategy, governance, quality assurance, reporting. So Deloitte's also do, they'll assure your report, they'll validate it, as I mentioned earlier on. They help you think about your impact on the climate, your ethical supply chain issues. To what extent as a consultant, are you aware or do you ignore? I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people put blinkers on here and actually say, well, our supply chain requires us to have raw materials from developing countries, and we kind of ignore the fact that we've got child labour working down cobalt mines in the Congo because we all want cobalt for our electric batteries for our electric cars. And this is a big issue in the electric vehicle market right now, is that the materials for the required for the batteries for cars, the raw materials tend to come from developing countries where the assurance of the environmental impact and the social impact in those countries is not the same as it is in the developed world where those vehicles are typically being sold. And it's unfortunate that lots of people do put the blinkers on a bit here. And it provides good material for journalists to write about scandals in countries where the environment is being badly spoiled, where the child labour is being used, and instead of going to school and becoming educated, which is one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, kids are working underground mining cobalt because it's cheap. And we have to think about that as consultants. Please don't ignore the whole supply chain. Just because your project is a bit about something in the UK, don't lose sight of the bigger picture here. And you can learn a lot from the big firms and their sustainability practice websites. There's a lot to go for there. So let me draw this presentation to a bit of a close. What I'd like to be able to do is give you a few thoughts about what you can do as consultants to embed sustainability into your practice. And there's a list of 8 things here that like you to think about taking away. Firstly, respect that triple bottom line. Always have that in mind, that whatever you're doing, you may think that you're only there for an economic purpose, for example, but actually there's always the triple bottom line here. There's always the economic purpose, there's always the environmental angle, and there's always a social issue, whether it's in this country or outside. The supply chain, don't ignore these things. Discuss with your client their sustainability strategy. It might surprise them when you show up being invited to work on some financial investment strategy or on an operational improvement program in a factory. Actually ask them about their sustainability strategy, and you can position this quite easily to make sure that what you deliver is in accordance with that, because they'll have one. It might expose the fact that some of your client staff don't really know much about their own sustainability, their own company's sustainability strategy. That's a great pity. It would be good if they did. Read their sustainability report. You'll always do your research on your client. Always, a key part of any consultancy project. Well, look at their sustainability report. I'm sure you look at their annual report. Look at the sustainability report as well. Sometimes these are in the same document, which is great because it makes it a bit easier. Other times they're not. Sometimes they're hidden away on a website. Sometimes, sad to say, their sustainability report is not up to date. Sometimes it's 2 or 3 years old. You can't find an up-to-date one. And this even applies to some big multinational corporations where they got onto the bandwagon of producing a sustainability report, but actually after a while found that it was a bit problematic. So they kind of left it hidden away somewhere and deal with the ESG bit now in their annual report, but don't have a separate sustainability report. So there are issues sometimes in companies finding that information. Try and assess how your work, whatever it is, fits with their sustainability profile. Not just their strategy, but their profile, because you take M&S, they're a retailer, naturally they have a high profile in public relations with the public, of course, because they're selling to the public. How does your work fit with that? Think about professional qualifications as consultants. There are many qualifications available in sustainability. Most degree courses these days in business always include sustainability modules. But those of you who completed your professional and tertiary education some while ago may not have benefited from that. Consider going on programs, getting qualification in consultancy and into sustainable consultancy. And then think about building sustainability into your offer, whatever that is. That does mean more than just having a nice, pretty picture with green images on, like the one at the front of the presentation. But think about sustainability for your offer. What's it about? What's your sustainability policy? What do you, as a small consultancy or a big one, what do you do about travel? How do you minimize your impact on the planet? How do you deal with your social obligations? Sure, as a company, you pay tax, which pays for education and so on, but do you have any charitable donations? Do you deal with your social purpose? What about your code of ethics? Do you adhere to the CMI code of ethics? If you're CMI members, of course you should do. If you're IC members, if you're consultants, and even if you're not members, what is your code of ethics that allows you to demonstrate that you're sustainable in the work that you do? There's lots of online resources that you can use to assess sustainability. In fact, there's a really good free sustainability toolkit online that you can look up to help you go to a client and look at how they deal with and how they perform against the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, I'd say, remember, sustainability is not a fad. There's lots of fads in consultancy that come and go. This is not one of them. This is actually something that should have got started a long time ago, but didn't. Now it has public support behind it. Organizations have realized that it's the appropriate thing to do, that we must get a move on with this. And sustainability is not a fad. Sustainability is actually how we all are going to make sure that we can live within that nice donut that I showed you earlier on for the foreseeable future, for my generation, for yours, for future generations to come. Because unless we get this right, then there won't be an economy in the world that is worth thinking about. There won't be multinational corporations because they'll have used up all the resources. That might sound a bit catastrophic, like an Armageddon. I'm not here to actually try and frighten people, but if we get this right now, then actually it just becomes the normal way of doing business. It becomes the normal way to say, actually, look, we're exploiting the planet's resources too much here. We can't live with this. We've got to find a better way. It stimulates innovation. We can't allow social issues to be problematic in other countries just because we export our work to them. All it does is create political instability, and we've seen the penalty of that in the last 20, 30 years in terms of international terrorism and so on and so forth, where countries actually are not socially sustainable and therefore intrude into other people's spaces. So you get into the whole world here of economics, politics, philosophy, if you want to, but please remember, sustainability is not a fad. And I'd like to take now any questions that anyone has about the whole sustainability issue, and see if I can answer them for you. Please put them in the chat window if you're watching live, and I'll do my best to answer them. I know we have a few questions that came up from beforehand, and I'm happy to answer those. So I'm going to hand back now to the CMI presenter, Michael. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for that excellent presentation. Thank you. And we do have a question indeed. I think some more are coming in. So we'll take the first one, and that is from Simon. And Simon asks, what are your views on the benefits for small and large businesses of being involved in membership or movements such as B Corp?
So I think my perspective on this is that if you take the social and environmental angle for the triple bottom line, companies can be very creative in the way that they learn about the environmental and social impacts of their businesses, but also then combine and collaborate with other organizations to improve things that are going on in their sectors. So my view is that companies need to make sure that they always take those three things in mind, and go back to my triple bottom line. Always take social, environmental issues with as much degree of seriousness as you do economic ones. You're not just there as companies to make money. You take organizations, CMI is a good example. CMI is a not-for-profit organization, but it has to make money to pay for its people to make sure that it can continue offering qualifications and the services like the education service, like running these webinars. Now, not-for-profit organizations are very good at networking with other not-for-profit organizations because they're happy to be open about it. Companies often have a bit of a barrier in networking and belonging to movements because they'll end up having to share information and they don't want to share it with competitors. So you've got to overcome that a bit. I think the only way that we will deal with sustainability is to collaborate. And it's quite interesting if you look at organizations that are typically, so if you take oil companies, and at the moment in the sustainability world, oil companies, everybody goes, oh, they're the work of the devil, The fact is that we're never going to be able to produce energy for the planet unless the revenues of the oil companies are reinvested into renewable energy. It's the only way it's going to happen. We can't just stop using renewable oil tomorrow. because we're not there yet. So joining these movements and membership, I would say, yeah, absolutely a good thing. Please consider it.
Excellent. Thank you for your answer, Jeremy, and thank you, Simon, for that question. I believe all the pre-submitted questions have been covered, and there aren't any other live questions that have come through. So we will wrap it up there, and I will extend a very special thank you, of course, to you, Jeremy, for your insight, for your expertise, and for the wonderful presentation that you delivered. And please don't forget, if you are a member of IC, you can log into Consulting Direct using the link in the live chat, and you can find a wide range of exclusive and practical development resources and much more.
Yeah.
And if you are not yet a member, you can join our community via the link that's also in the live chat to gain full access to our Consulting Direct portal. And also, please do take a few moments to let us know your feedback on today's event, and we will get the link posted in the chat for you. So again, thank you so much, Jeremy. And
that's okay, no problem.
Yes, I hope you all enjoy the rest of your day.
What I would say is, if anyone wants to contact me to talk about any of this, please go ahead. You can get me through CMI in the slide deck at the very end, which hasn't yet been shown on the screen. I've left my email address, so if anyone wants to make contact with me, then please go ahead, and I'll be happy to speak to you at any time. Thanks very much, Michael. That's great.
Our signal. I think. Okay, well, we lost our connection, Jeremy. Thank you so much. So yeah, Jeremy's details are there if you do wish to make contact directly. Excellent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you. That's great.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.